It's Sunday, August 27, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is co-founder and executive director of Run for Something, which recruits and supports young, diverse progressives running for local office. Last year, she was placed on the Time 100 Next list as one of the rising stars shaping the world. Amanda Lippman, welcome to The Weekend Show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, when you look at the lineup of candidates that were on the Fox debate stage for the GOP, it must have been quite distressing. I mean, it was distressing for me, but as somebody who kind of tries to seek out and recruit people that are going to help, change the face of American politics, just kind of give me a thought about what you see in the kind of current lineup of certainly Republican candidates in this case.
Yeah, to see the lineup sort of murderer's row, such that it is on the Fox News debate, I think really illustrated what the present and future of the Republican Party is, which is a really helpful wake-up call, because I do think there are still folks, especially maybe some older folks, who imagine that the Republican Party is this sacrosanct conservative movement of people who seek lower taxes and conservative judges, but are rational actors willing to be good faith, partners in governing. And what that debate showed us is that even without Trump, the Republican Party is not that anymore. I mean, it is incredibly clear if Vivek Ramaswamy is the future of the Republican Party, it is bigoted, it is hateful, it is dark, it is sad, it is dangerous. And any one of the other leaders on that stage that night sort of tell you who this party is, even without Trump. So to me, that was a really powerful recruiter for young people seeking to push back against this, because even without Trump on the ballot in years to come, people just like him are running and possibly winning.
Trump refused to take part in the debate. And, I don't blame him. I mean, he is many, many points ahead of the rest of them, so he didn't feel it was necessary. He also had to prepare to go and be arrested and booked and photographed at the Fulton County Jail, which is historic, really, isn't it? You and I are living through a time where a disgraced former president now has a mugshot. How does that make you feel as somebody who is, trying to put American politics back on track?
Well, I'll say, as a former Hillary Clinton presidential staffer who spent a lot of time watching rallies where she would get called lock her up, lock her up, lock her up, there's a certain amount of dark joy in seeing actions have consequences in that regard. As someone who is working to make American politics better and full of people who care and maybe won't break laws or try and undermine democracy, it's a little bit of gratitude that actions do sometimes have consequences, which I think we got away from for a while there, feeling like nothing matters, they can do anything and nothing will ever come of it. And also some deep sadness that this is what it's come to, that the leader of the Republican Party, the likely presidential nominee, is someone who's been convicted in 4 different places of something like 90 some odd counts. Many of which are directly related to undermining democracy, which I think is one of the most precious parts of the American experience.
I read a quote from Marty Kaplan, a professor at the University of Southern California School of Communications, and he said that mugshot of Donald Trump, he said it will forever be a part of the iconography of being alive in this time.
I mean, it's going to live on novelty T-shirts for generations. So,
but Trump is selling them. I mean, this is the thing. Within minutes of that mugshot being made public, Trump's campaign was using it to fundraise. And if this is not the depths of where American politics has got to, and I speak as a European who lives here and chooses to live here and bring my kids up here, and I choose this over Europe, but I recognize that there is something's gone a little bit wrong when a mugshot that is taken because you tried to overturn a legitimate, democratic election becomes a merchandising tool to fundraise so that you can pay your legal bills.
Well, and I think your final point there, that this is money going to pay his legal bills, not to his campaign, not to organizing, not to, staff thinking intentionally about policies that he might implement as president again, it's going to pay his legal bills.
Yeah.
And like, what a shameful campaign slogan for him. It's sad. There's an old, I think it's curse in many cultures, but especially in the Jewish one, may you live in interesting times. I would be ready for some less interesting times, I think.
Well, politics, and don't take this the wrong way, I'm sure you won't, but politics should be boring.
Oh, right? So boring.
In my view. And
100%.
It's, I've worked over the years in the UK. I worked as a political speechwriter and as a special advisor. And so I have a little experience. I've never wanted to run for office myself, but I recognize that the people that do tend to fall into two camps. And tell me if I'm wrong here, but from my experience, they're either the power hungry, looking for being there, for the action. They're looking for the wealth and the success and the celebration that goes with it. And then number two are people who genuinely care about making a difference. And they're not in it for the money, and they're not in it for the wrong reasons. They're in it for the right reasons, and they tend to fail comparatively. It's these populists and kind of power-hungry people that are the ones that seem to get to high office.
I think, said quite concisely, there's a distinction between the people who run to be something and the people who run to do something. The people who run to be something are people like Trump. They're people like a number of House Republicans, of U.S. senators, some of the governors. They, in many ways, succeed because they claim the title, but they fail because they're actually not doing anything meaningful for people. The ones who run to do something, which is the ones that Run for Something primarily works with, my organization helps, young people run for local office all across the country, because they are driven by so clearly articulating the problem they want to solve and the office that lets them solve it. I would argue that they're able to succeed. Now, maybe they don't climb as high up the food chain. Maybe there's more of a distinction on like the kind of power and glamour they're able to have. But especially when you're talking about the more than 500,000 local offices in the United States that directly affect people's lives, from the quality of streets you drive on to how clean your water is to how good your schools are, you can really move the needle on that stuff. Like a little bit goes a really long way there. So when I look at the folks that we've worked with over the years who have run for these small offices to do something specific to make people's lives better and then have done it, they make me feel good about democracy and about politics, which is a really nice change of pace relative to the national scene.
Let's just go back to the Fox debate and that kind of lineup of characters that were there, because it can be deceptive when you have a mixed demographic. And it was a pretty mixed demographic. I mean, traditionally, if that was a Republican primary debate, they would have been old white men. Mm-hmm. There would have been no females. There would have been no brown people or black people. And yet the mix was pretty good, but that was purely visual, wasn't it? Because as we know, even the likes of some of the kind of minority groups that were represented, I mean, Nikki Haley has Asian roots and Tim Scott, but these people hold far right and extremist views. And I think the reason I say it's deceptive is because there will be Republicans watching that debate going, oh, well, you see, the party's not racist. We've got a fat guy and we've got a, like they'll think that there is a mix, and it's deceptive in as much as actually all of them are really on the wrong side of history when it comes to their views.
Yeah, it's why representation is certainly important, but it's not in and of itself the end game. Like, yeah, it's good that there was a woman on the stage. It's not great that her policies, Nikki Haley's policies, are not pro-women. They're not pro-family. They're not pro-children. She is not pro-equality. And for her to advance is not good for the cause of women writ large. And I think this is something that Democrats have to often grapple with as well. Is like representation, good, but not everything. And it's not good in and of itself.
And I mean, going forward, I mean, we're in such a weird political conversation because, typically now, if Trump hadn't been arrested 4 times for such serious crimes, and, he's likely to perjure himself or be in contempt of court because he can't keep his mouth shut. So who only knows? And this is the thing that keeps us interested in politics, is that every week the story changes, or every day the story seems to change. And
I think you point out something that's really important for people to keep in mind. Is part of the reason he didn't participate in that debate is because there's almost no world in which he could stand up on stage for an hour and not say something that would get him into legal trouble.
I think that was the main reason.
Like, there's no world in which that's the case. And that's going to be true throughout the rest of his campaign. So every time he does a rally, where if you'll recall, in 2016 and 2020, when they were doing some rallies, and he would go up there and ramble for an hour, the kind of stuff that would come out of his mouth was crazy. It was crazy. So there is basically no world in which he does not dig these holes even deeper for himself. I think it's actually going to really hinder his campaign beyond the logistics of needing to be in courtrooms all the time across the 4 different jurisdictions and 4 different cases, with maybe more to come. There is a real legal risk for him to be campaigning that I think is going to make him and his team very, very frustrated very quickly.
It must frustrate you that the media is giving him oxygen, because, the coverage, I tried not to watch it, but I ended up watching it on mute while I was writing. But just seeing the circus on Thursday of his motorcade, and then filming the plane landing at Hartsfield-Jackson, and, Trump Force One, and it's so offensive. This guy is a criminal. I mean, I appreciate innocent until proven guilty, but there is compelling evidence here. You don't really need to be a judge to work out what's gone on. And yet the media is thriving and profiting from covering Trump. And so really the debate that took place the day before has kind of now become ancient history. And really the mugshot and the coverage of Trump is all that anyone's really talking about.
Yeah, it is frustrating, but also I get it. The thing that I get personally, maybe not even frustrated by, but like disappointed by, is the conversations I'll have with members of the media, with reporters who are so well intentioned and really want to find ways to cover things besides Trump, and will say, like, I can't, there's no audience for it. But then you talk to people who want to see things besides Trump, and there's no content for them. So there's like such a clear disconnect there that can make it really hard for other things that really do affect people's lives to break through.
Trump is, I say he's loving this, but to him it's all about revenue and power, and he can grift more, and any moment that anyone says something against him, or I mean, he even hinted in the Tucker Carlson interview that there might be more indictments than 4. Yeah. Oh, well, there might be more coming. I don't know. I mean, when he said that, I was like, wow, like, you love this, like, you need this. This to you is giving you the kind of opportunity to fundraise and make more money. And he also said in that interview that most of the revenue that has come in, or the support that has come in small amounts, $30, $40, which suggests that this is coming from people that can't afford much more than that. They're giving away their last paycheck or whatever's left over at the end of the month to this guy.
Yeah, it's alarming that he continues to raise on these indictments. But I also think it speaks to the fact that he really needs to be the underdog, and his people need to feel like the underdogs. They need to feel like they're under attack. And not to give him credit for anything, but it is a masterful storytelling technique of, I am innocent, I am aggrieved, I am just like one of the man of the people trying to get by, and these evil DAs are coming after me, and look at all the people who are orchestrating these DAs, and then it becomes like anti-Semitic and racist.
And I'm doing it for you. They'll be coming after you next. I mean, This is the language of fascists.
Yeah, and it's trying to build a sense of tribal identity around being under attack. Now, granted, most people are never going to pay hush money to a porn star to cover up a campaign story, or try and subvert democracy by demanding fake electors, or try and find votes that don't exist in a state.
Or steal official secrets. Don't leave that one out.
I always forget about the documents in the bathroom and Mar-a-Lago, those photos that haunt my dreams.
Yeah.
Most people are not going to experience that. And I do think it does come in a little bit into tension with the Republican Party, sort of tough on crime, like, support the justice system, support the cops, but not this crime and not those cops. So, more for them, not for us.
I want to talk about, like, the difference between the left and the right in a minute, but let's just talk about cops for a second, because, I tweeted something about his motorcade, and I was like, he doesn't need this motorcade. He's a private citizen. Like, this is all theater. And someone was like, prove to me that he, where's the document that shows that he asked for that motorcade? It was a stupid question. And of course, there's no answer to it. But my point is that, this kind of theatrical aspect to it is unfortunately playing into the minds of people that will continue to support him, because as far as Trump is concerned, he is the president. As far as his supporters are concerned, he is the president. And the sycophants that work for him and that are around him, they refer to him as Mr. President, and he is still acting that role. And the reason I believe that it's no different to how he did it when he was the president is because he wasn't really the president when he was the president.
Yeah.
He was pretending to be the president, like a show on Netflix where the guy has to be the president. It's like, this is our reality. And how do you cope with that?
By doing the work that I do so that I don't have to focus too hard on what Trump is up to, which I will say helps. And I like to think, and maybe this is just like pure optimism, having drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak, that the American people are eventually going to get it right. The fact that we won in 2020, incredible. The fact that we've continued to hold the Senate, incredible. And we would have held the House if not for gerrymandering. That is a testament, I think, to what the American people will tolerate. And the other thing I keep in mind is, like, he's not just that he's not that popular, he is incredibly unpopular. He has, yes, a small portion of the Republican base, enough to be able to win a Republican primary, but the dude is deeply hated by most people. And many, many voters, something like, 2/3, are uninterested in a rematch between him and Biden for whatever reason. They want to move on. They're over this. And I find that very comforting too.
Let's talk about his popularity because, again, a little like the motorcade, it's all for show.
Yeah.
And same with the rallies. And, whenever he's on the camera, they always stack the people behind him so it looks busy. It's show business. They know what they're doing. They're all the people involved. They're all show people. And invariably, it gives a false sense of security to MAGA Republicans that they are
totally
the majority. And he keeps repeating, I am so far ahead in the polls. He even claims he's beating Joe Biden in the polls, which is not true. But by saying it over and over and over, it kind of pushes home that argument. And it's kind of very clever, right? But it's a fascist moves. It's very dangerous for democracy. It's devalued democracy. It's made the US a bit of a laughing stock on the world stage, and even if he was to be re-elected, no other countries would work with him.
Yeah.
They just don't trust him. And so this kind of idea, with your work and your experience, like, I reckon it's actually maybe just 20%, 25% of Republicans that are real hardcore Trump supporters.
Yeah.
MAGA Republicans. I can't see it being more than that. And then you have your fiscal conservatives, and then the ones that say, "Oh, I'm socially liberal, but fiscally conservative." Yeah. Poof. There's so many different flavors of Republicans, and as Joe Biden says, it's not your grandfather's party anymore.
No.
In terms of support, how do you think, if there was to be like a button that we could press that would just flick the numbers and be like, these are the real numbers, what do you think we're talking about here?
In terms of how much support Trump has?
Yeah, how does that Republican support split out? What I'm thinking as in terms of like what are we up against in 2024?
I think he will, unless something crazy happens, which I'm sure many establishment Republicans are hoping for, He's going to be the Republican nominee for president.
Yeah.
Joe Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee again.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at what will unfortunately likely continue to be a very close election. Not because Biden is not popular or because Biden has not done a good job. I think the president has in many ways overperformed expectations. There's always room for improvement, but given all the hardship he was handled, like A+ on a curve. Trump is so deeply unpopular, and the structure and the way that our elections are run between the Electoral College, the voter suppression laws, the likely disinformation campaigns we're going to experience, people sowing chaos at polling stations, at voter registration processes, especially when you start getting more granular in like townships in Michigan and counties in Georgia. It's going to be closer than we would like, than we can imagine. And I do think that is something that is really hard to wrap your head around, of like, how could it possibly be close? Because he's so clearly bad. And the Republicans have been preparing for this for a long time. Like, they have built the structures of our elections between drawing the maps and writing the rules, and then, changing who runs elections at the very state and local levels, such that it actually doesn't matter how popular their candidate is.
Yeah, this is what I've been trying to explain to people, is that, when people think, and it's mainly Democrats, they're like, oh, well, Trump's done, that's it, and I'm like, he is not, because he can still run from prison, he'll be a martyr, and the Electoral College is rigged. It is just designed to favor Republicans, and it's not a fair system of proportional representation or even close. And so you really do have to be very worried. And I can imagine him being under house arrest. I don't think he'll go to a federal prison, but I think he'll be under house arrest, and he'll end up basically running from Mar-a-Lago.
Basement campaign 2.0.
Yeah. He criticized Joe Biden for never leaving the basement. He's going to have a tough time climbing those stairs. And isn't this the problem, that Republicans, no matter how criminal their leader in this case, they still won't switch their vote. I understand that there is independents and undecided and moderates and the whole kind of gamut, but in terms of when it comes to going into the polling place and putting a check mark in a box, how many Republicans would be prepared to vote for the other guy on the other side just because their candidate was not up to standard?
And I think this is why the third party stuff is so dangerous, because there's a number of people, I don't know the exact percentages here, but there is a percentage of Republicans who are uninterested in voting for Trump again, but will not vote for a Democrat because whatever reason, the brand association they have with Democrats, like, Republican is not just how they vote. It is a sense of identity. It's a part of the community you're in. It is like who you are. And to cast a vote for a Democrat, it forces such cognitive dissonance that it's like physically and viscerally uncomfortable. In the same way that I would feel physically and viscerally uncomfortable voting for a Republican, any number of reasons. That's why the third party stuff is so dangerous, because if there's another option on the ticket that isn't Democrat or Republican, many people who might otherwise either not show up at the polls at all or not fill in the presidential round will vote for that third party ticket, whether it's No Labels or the Green Party or the People's Party, whatever it might be. And, remember that the margins of these races can be in the hundreds or thousands or maybe tens of thousands. So you don't need that much to move the needle here. That's why what No Labels is doing is incredibly dangerous.
That's Joe Manchin and the likes,
which is trying to pretend to be a political party, but they're not. They are not a political party. Political parties have this is a pet peeve of mine. Political parties have very particular rules about donor disclosure, about what they can spend money on, about the kind of rates they get, about how they can engage with candidates. And we actually do know a lot about what happens inside a formal political party because they have to tell us a lot. No Labels is not legally a political party. Their donors are hidden. They're not able to engage with candidates the way that a party can, and they shouldn't pretend otherwise. Rant over. There is what they are doing on some of these ballots to try and present a unity ticket. One, as if the candidate itself doesn't matter. sure, maybe I wouldn't want to vote for Joe Biden again, hypothetically, but show me who the third party candidate is before I tell you what I want to do with that. So like who the candidate is really important. And even this idea of a unity ticket, okay, who's in charge? What do they believe? How are they going to govern? Is it a Republican presidential, at the top of that ticket? It makes a big difference to a Democrat at the top of the ticket. I think it is just so insulting to voters and so dangerous and indicative of, candidly, a donor community that is scared about Trump and not thrilled about Biden and looking for somewhere else to put their money, and no labels is where they've gone, instead of, say, funding anything else in the ecosystem.
And it's kind of offensive, isn't it, that Joe Manchin has been, pretending to be a Democrat all this time.
I believe him. He and Joe Manchin, I don't agree with him on a lot of policy issues, but I understand where he's coming from. He's representing his community in West Virginia. I think some stuff is a little questionable about who his funders are and how he gets the campaign funds he does. But at the very least, you can see the principles that he's acting on. Kyrsten Sinema, what is going on there? There is no core. There is no principles. There is no conviction. And that to me is even more dangerous, because that's someone you can just, and they'll blow wherever the wind takes them.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to talk about voter apathy and how we get people out to vote in just a moment. We can take a quick pause for our sponsor and then come back with more from Amanda Littman. This episode of The Weekend Show is brought to you by Manukora Honey. Now, when I say the word honey, you might be thinking about the stuff that comes in those plastic bear-shaped bottles at the supermarket. Well, this is nothing like that. Manukora makes Manuka honey, a super honey that comes from New Zealand, where the bees only feed on the nectar of the Manuka tea tree, making something that is rich, herbaceous and complex, with a creamier texture that's unlike anything you've ever tried before. You can use it just like the honey that you're used to, but Manuka honey is super because it also contains unique antioxidants and prebiotics, as well as a natural antibacterial compound called MGO that only comes from the nectar of this tea tree. These nutrients support optimal immune and digestive health, so it's win-win. You can continue to use honey in all of the ways you love, and you can enjoy all of the health benefits of MGO as well. Manukora sent me a jar and squeeze bottle of their 850 Plus MGO Manuka honey, their best-selling product. The 850 Plus honey has this creamy caramel texture that melts in your mouth, and it's unlike anything I've ever tried. I can grab a spoonful out of a jar and put it in my favorite beverage, or squeeze some honey out on some toast or oatmeal. It's delicious. Each morning I start my day with a spoonful of the Manuka honey, and it's the perfect amount of sweetness with the perfect consistency. If you head to manukora.com/weekend or use code WEEKEND, you'll automatically get an extra free pack of the 850 Plus honey sticks with your order, a $15 value. Now, I love the jar and squeeze bottle, but the extra pack of compostable honey sticks is also perfect for whenever you're on the go. You can bring them with you when you're traveling, if you need a quick snack or running errands, and they're the perfect energy boost if you're out for a run or at the gym. So go to Manukora, manukora.com/weekend, or use code WEEKEND to get a free pack of compostable honey sticks with your order. You haven't tasted or seen honey like this before, so indulge and try some honey with superpowers from Manukora. Did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Maid's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Maid uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding, so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Using silver-infused fabrics originally inspired by NASA, Miracle Maid sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get a better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable, without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code WEEKEND at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend and use the code WEEKEND to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. That's trymiracle.com/weekend to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. This summer, you could spend thousands of dollars on planes, hotels, and tourist traps. Or you could spend less money on a beautiful garden that will give you years of pleasure with FastGrowingTrees.com. FastGrowingTrees.com has thousands of easy-to-grow plant, shrub, and tree varieties expertly curated for your unique climate and needs. From Mayor lemons to evergreens to shade trees and everything in between. No more waiting in long lines and hauling heavy plants around. With FastGrowingTrees.com, you order online and your plants arrive at your door in just a few days. No green thumb? No problem. Fast Growing Trees plant experts are just a Zoom, chat, or phone call away, always available and always eager to help. They can even walk you through your entire garden to help solve problems you're having with plants and trees. Plus, Fast Growing Trees plant experts have specialized degrees and training to help troubleshoot from root to leaf. It's like telehealth for your plants. I personally love FastGrowingTrees.com because they had the Mayor lemon tree that I was looking for that I didn't think I could get in California, and they helped me, they sent it, and now the plant is thriving. And they can help you too. And with Fast Growing Trees, they have a 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee. You know, everything will look great, fresh, out of the box. Join almost 2 million happy Fast Growing Trees customers. Go to fastgrowingtrees.com/weekend now to get 15% off your entire order. That's 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com/weekend. It's the Weekend Show, and we're back with Amanda Lippman from Run for Something. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Run for something. It's like, how do you even get candidates to actually want to be politicians? And or want to be candidates to become politicians. And I've always thought this, and it was the same in the UK, you know, and they call it show business for ugly people, and there's all these kind of horrible phrases that are attached to politics. But the reality is that, you know, the right kind of people, because we had this, you know, in the last election where young people kind of came into politics and didn't want to stick around. You know, we had this in England as well. I mean, they were just like, I've tried this and it's just too difficult and there's too much politics in politics and it's not what I thought it was going to be. Too much bureaucracy, too much, you know, whippage coming down from the top of the party. And so I just can't do what I had hoped to do. And then you have the opposite end of that, which is voter apathy, where people just are not that engaged with politics. They don't want to get off their armchair and actually go to a polling place. They haven't got their heads around mail-in voting. I mean, that's why Republicans were so scared about mail-in voting, because they know that Republicans don't fill it in. You know, they don't go through that process. So let's just talk about the candidates for a moment, because obviously this is your area of expertise. What are you seeing out there in terms of who is coming through to kind of join this rather kind of uncomfortable party that is, I'm not talking about a political party, but politics in general?
So for those who are not familiar, just a quick sort of background here. Run for Something recruits and supports young, diverse progressives running for local office for the first time. So we primarily work with people 40 years old and under running for things like state house, state senate, city council, school board, library board. And since we launched on Trump's inauguration day, we've had more than 135,000 young people all across the country who've raised their hands to say, hi, me, I want to learn more. We've endorsed more than 2,000, helped elect more than 850 across nearly every state, mostly women, mostly people of color, all young people. So that is the community that I engage with as you think about candidates. And the thing that I found really inspiring about them and really interesting about them, and the thing that they all share in spite of the wide variety of backgrounds, is they are, as we talked about earlier, people who run to do something. They have such a clear why. We ask every person who comes through to really be able to articulate the answer to 3 key questions. What is the problem you care about solving? What is the office you want to run for that gives you the power to solve it? And why should other people want you to win? Which is different than why do you want to win? You want to win because winning is great and losing sucks. Other people want you to win because you're going to make their life better, or you're going to stop harm from happening, or you're going to stand up for them. There's something tangible that you can feel. And the candidates who are able to articulate an answer to those 3 questions, everything else about their campaign is logistics. And they are driven by something internal, something intrinsic, something inherent to who they are that allows them the ability to deal with the BS that comes with being a politician. Because politician is not who they are. Who they are, the leader. They're a public servant. Politician just happens to be the way that they get that thing done, but it's not really core to their sense of self. It's really beautiful. It's like a little sappy. It's a little sappy, but it's really beautiful.
Do we have Donald Trump to thank for all of this engagement? I mean, you launched on Inauguration Day, which is around the time I moved to the United States, actually. I moved 2 weeks before Trump's inauguration, which was it was a little disappointing because, I had something else in mind for my children.
Yeah.
But what Trump did do was expose how bad it can get and how much help is needed to prevent it from happening ever again. And I am personally surprised that more has not been done in Congress to kind of change the rules so that a Donald Trump, a kind of fascist, autocrat, wannabe dictator, doesn't, ever get in again, because clearly these checks on branches of government did not work. Impeachments mean nothing if they're not ratified in the Senate. And as far as he's concerned, they have no value. I mean, he doesn't care much for the indictments either. But so how much did Trump's inauguration and presidency kind of help your recruiting process?
Oh, I think it was a huge catalyst. But the interesting thing I will note is that of the folks who sign up with us, we, at least for the first couple of years, would ask you, why? Tell us your why up front. And then we matched that back to people who actually got on the ballot. And of the people who signed up with us and then actually ran for office, only 3% of them mentioned Trump in their intake survey. It wasn't, it was about him because he was the water we were all swimming in, but he wasn't the bait. He wasn't the hook. That to me says that it's not just a fad. It's not just a thing that will happen over the course of the 4 years that Trump was president and then dissipate. I will say it's gotten harder. The last 2 years, our pace of average new candidate signing up has slowed down a little bit, but we're still getting hundreds of people every week raising their hands saying, I would like to run for office. Please help me. That just means we have to do more aggressive outreach and we'll have more conversations. But absolutely, Trump's candidacy and then presidency was a huge part of it.
The kind of, from where I'm from, the Democratic Party are not particularly progressive. Okay.
Yeah.
Here things are very different. Obviously, the right is the far right and the extreme right, and the left is kind of center and center left. But Europe and the rest of the world has a different view on all things. No one questions whether climate change is real. It's not been politicized. Nobody questioned whether COVID was a Democrat hoax. They just got on with it.
American exceptionalism at its finest.
Right. And abortion, which was a precedent for 50 years, to be able to reverse that takes a certain kind of evil, in my view, that you would wind the clock back 50, 60 years to a time when women didn't have a choice. And the fact is that now all the candidates pretty much on the stage at that Fox debate, they all were what they call pro-life, which is the opposite, really. It's a terrible way they've rebranded, anti-abortion. And Donald Trump as well, a guy who, I'm sure his personal beliefs are not like that, but he's saying it because he wants that evangelical vote and Christian conservative vote and everything else. So my point really is, how do we address this idea that people on the left in America are referred to as kind of radical liberals and snowflakes and all of this offensive language that's used, when in fact, compared to the rest of the world, it's hardly very liberal at all?
Well, part of this, most people aren't really paying attention to the rest of the world, for better or worse. And that's a problem with our education system. It's a problem with our news environment.
Yeah.
You know, it's a structural and cultural issue.
Yeah.
I also think that there is real value in making sure that people know what Democrats are doing, who a Democrat is. It is really not easy, but really simplistic to be able to hate the Democrat that you might see talked about on Fox News, that will come up on like Pop Crave, your Twitter feed or whatever, your X feed, your thread. It is much harder to have hatred in your heart for the young woman who comes to your door and says, knock, 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 hi, I'm Jane. I'm running for county clerk. I want to talk to you about your property taxes. I want to talk to you about your schools. I want to talk to you about our kids. I want to talk to you about the restaurants down the street and the bus lanes and the stop signs and the cost of your home. You talk to someone like that about the issues that really matter to them. And they are a Democrat who you then see at the gym, at the grocery store, at the PTA meetings, pick up basketball, wherever it might be. That helps give some flavor and some texture to the identity of Democrat, more than basically any national branding campaign could ever hope to do. Now, it's not to say we shouldn't also do national branding. We shouldn't also think really carefully about, the party that we are. But it's so hard for Democrats, the diversity of our party, both in representation, but also, you have to be able to win as a Democrat, both in New York City, where I live, but also in Alaska and Hawaii and Iowa and California. That means that Democrats are talking about a whole range of issues to a whole range of communities. So we have to really make sure we can localize it and give people a person that they affiliate as Democrat, as opposed to this abstraction. Let's
talk about that kind of nuance that is the Democrat Party. Mm-hmm. Because, the right wing is not nuanced. No. It's very simple. It's build the wall, deport all illegal immigrants.
Invade Mexico is their new thing, which I don't think we're talking about enough.
Invade Mexico, anti-abortion, dressed up as pro-life. It's very clear, cut and dry, like 5 hot button issues. Lower taxes, except it's not lowering taxes for the average person. It's lowering taxes for the top 1%. But they are very good at selling these issues because they are so simplistic. And it's a much easier job as a marketeer to be working for the Republican Party than it is for the Democrats.
Well, they don't have to reach a diversity of voters. They don't have to reach a diversity of communities. Like, no Republican is ever going to try and win my vote. I'm a young, white married mom in Brooklyn. They have no interest in my issues or what I care about. That is a benefit to them. They never have to try and win urban voters. They never have to really try and win anyone besides rural communities. And this gets to the thing we talked about earlier, the structure of the Electoral College. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whereas Democrats have to win in places more than just cities. We have to try and lose by less in rural communities. So we got to talk about more. We got to be more nuanced. We got to have more texture to our campaign. And that makes it much harder.
And that is the problem, isn't it? Because people don't have time for nuance.
No.
People don't have the energy to put in to have long-form conversations. And you really, I can talk for hours and hours about any of these subjects. And people say to me, why do you still talk about Trump? Like, why is he so interested? And it's like, this is the most important thing that's ever happened in political history. A Western leader who basically tries to stage a coup against his own country. It's like, you really have to talk about this until you have no air left in your lungs. And the apathy is not just about going out and voting, but it's also about engagement and communicating on these subjects. And it's always been very interesting to me is how difficult it is for Democrats to kind of market their wares. There's been some simple things that have changed recently, which I've really enjoyed watching. Like, I think the Joe Biden campaign employed a young female internet marketeer, like doing the Twitter account and everything. And it was funny and it was punchy and it kind of poked back at criticism. and it used language and imagery very well. And I was like, wow, actually you can make a difference if you just take on these issues. And my solution that I have offered in previous episodes is I've said that the Democrats should be doing weekly press conferences where they debunk all of the propaganda that comes from the right. So they have a screen and it comes down and they show the propaganda that was displayed during the week and they debunk it and they tell the truth and they say, okay, see you next week and we'll debunk more propaganda. And it's being left to people like me to do stuff like this, you know? So what more can the Democrats really do in terms of that engagement, being very specific about, A, the lies that are coming from the other side, but also detailing the nuance that is the thinking of democratic minds? Because, you know, I am happy to pay tax because I want other people to benefit.
Yeah.
And because I believe in this kind of system where we all support each other. We're not really talking about that.
I think part of this comes to what we're doing at Run for Something, which is recruiting good candidates who can be good messengers and talk in a way that their neighbors understand. We worked with a young woman in Maine, Chloe Maxman, who now runs an incredible organization, Dirt Road Organizing, that's trying to reach rural voters. But she first flipped a state house seat in Maine and then flipped a state senate seat in Maine, one that had been held, the first, I believe, had been held by Republicans for 18 years. And I got the chance to talk to her at one point, and she was telling me how she would go knock doors and talk to voters, and she would talk to Trump voters. And I asked her, like, how do you convince them? She's like, I'm not trying to convince them, but like, they know me. I just want to listen. I talk, like, I clarify the facts. Like, when they're wrong, like, I tell them they're wrong. But when I'm here, I want to hear what's on their mind. But at the end of the day, they know me because I'm Chloe. My family runs the farm down the street. Like, my campaign has been calling and helping them deal with like snow plows and community health stuff. And, you know, her team called like every senior citizen in her district multiple times. That kind of personal relationship and the fact that she is of the community, with the community, in the community, day in, day out, that's the kind of thing you need. Like Joe Biden, who, again, like, all things considered, has done a pretty good job, maybe even great job, can't be an effective messenger to every person, because a singular message that comes from him, if he says, I want to forgive student loans, and AOC says, I want to forgive student loans, and Joe Manchin says, I want to forgive student loans, those same sentences coming from each of those people will mean wildly different things.
Yeah.
That brand of that person combined with that message is really important. And I do think that's something that like operatives sometimes get in our head about, of like, we just have to find the right exact words and sentences and logo and images. And it's like, no, that's not how people consume information. They consume information from people. We got to think about the people.
Some of the messaging has not been great. I mean, defund the police was a disaster in terms of like what that actually meant versus, you know, how people received it and how it was weaponized by the other side.
That was also activists. That wasn't politicians. And I do think that's a thing we got to be really careful, is like activists were doing their job, and the fact that politicians weren't able to really grapple with it is a failure of politicians. It's not a failure of the activists.
Demilitarize the police might have been a better way of doing it, right?
You know, there's a whole bunch of, as a political operative, we did some research here of like reimagining public safety, of, you know, thinking about how can we better fund our community. But I never want to fault the activists for doing their part. The politicians and the elected should have handled it better. Yeah,
no, that's a very good point. Let's look at some of the candidates that are doing very well. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the obvious choice is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has managed to not just do great for her constituents, but also has entertained the rest of us on Instagram. You know, I mean, it's kind of brilliant the way she has this reportage of her own life, and you get to see her going to events and choosing a dress and, you know, really like living. Is that what you're talking about in terms of like who the messenger is and really kind of getting to know something about them in addition to just the policies?
And I think the best candidates, and we see this with AOC, we see this with Congressman Maxwell Frost, and we even see this from folks like Cory Booker and Kirsten Gillibrand to a certain extent, and Elizabeth Warren. Each of them, well, from a variety of backgrounds and generations, sort of live what I like to call like the Zoomer mentality, or like the young millennial mentality of authentic. They know themselves and they know who they are. They understand that the internet is not real life, but is a really important way to communicate about real life. And they have a sense of what is for them versus what is for everyone. Like, we see a lot about AOC's life. We see a lot about the stories that she did about the Codel to Latin America and talking about like how she picked what outfit to wear. That's incredibly personal and interesting and relatable. And there's so much that she's not telling us. And she has a very clear boundary of what is for her versus what is for us. I think that's really important. And it's something that people who've grown up on the internet really understand, that Instagram is not reality. You can curate your persona.
But it is for a lot of people that live either in rural areas where they don't get the chance to go out and live. So they end up living by proxy through other people's lives. And AOC has really painted a very positive picture. I mean, even the way that she kind of beat out the old Democrat in Queens. I mean, that was very impressive because he was a Democrat and yet he was lazy. She was like, we deserve better.
I think she was able to genuinely connect with her community in a way that they understood. She gave them respect. She listened. She showed up, and lightning struck in the sense that it was a low turnout election, that he was particularly slimy, all of that being the case. It's the kind of thing we see with the Run for Something candidates we work with across the country. We're like, if you really understand your neighbors and you understand who you are and how you want to connect with them and how they want to be connected with, you can win even when you're outspent. You can win even when the odds are long. You can win even in a Republican place. You can win when you're running against a Republican who's been in office longer than you've been alive. Nothing is impossible, which, again, I find really
But part of the problem is that there's no kind of punishment for politicians who are not doing their job.
No, I know.
And there's people like Kirsten Sinema who like never show up. They're hardly there. I mean, she's a senator, and then we've seen it with George Santos, who's never at his local constituency office, and he hasn't even changed the sign. It's still got the name of the old guy there. There needs to be something in place that says if you do not do the job that you signed up to do, then you lose your privileges, or there'll be a by-election. It's like, it makes no sense to me that you can just get elected and then do nothing and get away with it for years.
Well, ideally, elections are the way we hold people accountable.
Right, but it's still 2 or 4 or 5 years away.
Yeah, it's frustrating. We Run for Something works in primaries occasionally against incumbents, and every so often when we support a candidate, I will get people, sliding into my DMs or calling or emailing me, telling me how mad they are. The incumbent is doing such a great job. I'm like, great. Then why are you concerned? Well, then they should welcome healthy competition. But if you feel like they're doing a great job, then what is the downside of them having to make that case to voters? Elections are how we hold people accountable. Now, there's a lot to do around structural reform. There's a lot to do around campaign finance reform. There's a lot to do around conversations on term limits and on, sequential time served, all of that. But I do think more often than not, people who don't do their job for a long period of time do eventually get what's coming. Eventually.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is the kind of the democratic process.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about that in just a moment. We're going to have to take another quick break for our sponsor, but we'll come back and do more in just a moment here on The Weekend Show. Have you heard of senescent cells, also known as zombie cells? These old, worn-out cells no longer serve a useful function for our health, wasting our energy and nutritional resources. These zombie cells tend to accumulate in our bodies as we age, leading to the aches, slow workout recoveries, and sluggish mental and physical energy associated with that middle-age feeling. Our sponsor, Neurohacker, packs 7 of the most science-backed senolytic ingredients into one formula called Qualia Senolytic, and you can take it just 2 days a month for fast, noticeable benefits for a much better aging process. Senolytic ingredients are science-backed to support our body's natural elimination of zombie cells. My body and energy levels feel about 15 years younger after just a couple of months of adding Qualia Senolytic to my diet. I love how easy it is to take. Having more physical and mental energy for my family and friends is such a win in how I show up for those I love. My productivity has doubled. I feel invigorated and enthusiastic again with the daily drive and enthusiasm to get things done. The formula is non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and the ingredients are meant to complement one another, factoring in the combined effect of all ingredients together. It's also backed by a 100-day money-back guarantee, so you have almost 3 months to try Qualia Senolytic at no financial risk and decide for yourself. If you're in your late 20s or older, adding Qualia Senolytic to your diet can play a crucial role in combating negative aging symptoms. Go to neurohacker.com/weekend for up to 50% off Qualia Senolytic. And as a listener to The Weekend Show, use code WEEKEND at checkout for an extra 15% off your first purchase. That's neurohacker.com/weekend to try Qualia Senolytic with code WEEKEND and start aging on your terms. Rocket Money has saved me money by alerting me to subscriptions that I didn't even know I still had. Are your subscriptions draining your wallet? The average person has around 12 paid subscriptions, and they might not even remember subscribing to half of them. If you have no idea just how much you're spending each month, then you need Rocket Money. It's a great app that tracks all of your expenses so you know exactly where your money is going. There's subscriptions for everything these days, from streaming services to fitness programs, and sometimes it feels impossible to keep tabs on what you're paying for every month. That's why I'm such a huge fan of Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills, all in one place. With Rocket Money, you can easily cancel the ones you don't want with just the press of a button. No more long hold times or annoying emails with customer service. Rocket Money does all the work for you. It also lets you monitor all your expenses in one place. It recommends custom budgets based on past spending. They'll even send you notifications when you've reached your spending limits. With over 3 million users and counting, Rocket Money customers have saved an average of $720 each year. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your money the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/weekend. That's rocketmoney.com/weekend. We're back with Amanda Lippman here on The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. There is this argument that is American politics. I'm on the left, you're on the right. We disagree. There's nothing we agree about. Our policies are completely opposed. Our interests and our thinking is completely opposed. And that is the kind of external view of it. Now, I personally, and I'm sure you're the same, I don't believe that that is true. I feel like it's a fake argument, that everybody is hating each other and no one has taken any time to sit down and actually realize that they have a lot of common interests. And unfortunately, it's the fact that we have a two-party system that is the reason that people either have to jump in that camp or that camp. And if they jump in the Republican camp, it means that they will be brainwashed into, because of the kind of cult-like mentality of it, they'll be brainwashed further to the right than they would otherwise be. Yeah. And so, if you want to be a Trump supporter or you want to be a Republican, or even if you're just in it because you like Mitch McConnell, I don't know, you're probably going to end up taking on some of those views just because you don't really have any choice in political party. How do we address this? The fact that America's politics is so broken, the democracy is broken from the perspective that, the last guy tried to overturn it, and it is possible to overturn it. You don't need much. Bunch of fake electors, get the vice president to switch out the envelopes. I mean, it's not that difficult. But in terms of the people, how do we get beyond this situation that we're in now? And I know it's been around since time began, but it's never been this polarized. How do we get people to realize that actually they are more liberal than they think? I mean, if you were to poll the country as a whole, people are much more pro-choice than the Republican Party would have you believe.
I think part of this will come with generational shift as boomers sort of age out of power and Gen X and millennials age in, and Zoomers to a certain extent too. Like, that will come. I think there's some of this that's really baked into the structure, in particular around where people are able to live. I think we underestimate housing costs as sort of a structural next level a factor of polarization in that it really starts to divide people by class, and then sort of makes people either be unable to move or unable to stay, such that it is. And you like start to harbor some resentment about the lack of control in your life, and all of that. I do think there's a lot to do around creating more third spaces in communities. And there's a lot of really interesting research here about how to get people mingling again, how to recreate civic organizations, how the demise of organized religion and the increase in polarization and the lack of like intergenerational, inter-community mingling all has something to do with it. But mostly I think we just got to get ourselves at least a little bit closer to normal again on the national political scene before we can even start to think about turning down the temperature. And that is probably 4 to 6 years away, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's kind of generational, isn't it? Because of COVID, we're all now comfortable working from home in our internet bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people have not gone back into society and not gone back into kind of integrating with people that they might not agree with. And the whole point of that discourse is it tends to happen in communal spaces.
Yeah.
And the problem with being online is that you will be online in your political ecosystem and you don't even realize it, but you're kind of just seeking out people that agree with you.
I love my bubble. My bubble is safe. My bubble is comforting.
Me too.
It's so nice.
Me too. And when people say to me, I'd love to meet you sometime, I'm like, no, I don't want to meet you. I'm very happy to do a bit of FaceTime, bit of texting, but I'm really very happy in my bubble or in my box, as people have come to realize. I very rarely appear outside of it. And so the comfort that we get from being in our bubbles, the downside to that is in the long run, it will contribute to the breakdown of a kind of civic society. And, the right are threatening civil war. Mm-hmm. And, there's been a lot of code in some of the stuff that Trump has been saying. QAnon is bubbling up more than ever. It's becoming, they're ready for Judgment Day. And, they always said that if Trump ever got whatever, I don't know, imprisoned or something, it would, I'm scared of these kind of lone wolf characters that take it upon themselves to try and, seek retribution. And so I'm just really asking, from your perspective, you are seeing the best of this. You are seeing people that are engaged and inspired and excited and feel like they have some solutions for change. And the rest of us, we don't get to see that because new candidates never really get airtime. They don't get the coverage, The TV prefers a failed politician to one that hasn't even started yet, right? So let's just end on a more optimistic note, if we can.
I would be thrilled to. Just to take us a little bit to a dark place for a moment, though, but I'll spin you there positively. There's a story in the Tampa Bay Times this week that was looking at all the book challenges that came out of Florida. And they looked in particular that of 1,100 book challenges in the last year, between July 2022 and June 2023, 1,100 challenges to books across the state. 700 came from just 2 counties, which make up 3% of the public school enrollment. So pretty small, underpopulated communities. Of those 700, 600 came from 2 people. 2 people with a lot of time on their hands and a lot of rage. Now, the consequences of those 2 people spending a lot of time challenging books were things like counties shutting down their school libraries, covering their books with black paper to mitigate access. The story is worth reading in part because the Tampa Bay Times reporter notes, like, I was interviewing the superintendent, and while we were in conversation, he had 2 missed calls from one of the 2 who was challenging so many books. Like, they're distracting from the act of educating our kids. Now, in many ways, that's really upsetting because this is 2 people who are leveraging the infrastructure of the Republican sort of ecosystem in order to keep kids from getting access to the books that they need. Flip to that is it's just 2 people. It's just 2. So the power that an individual has to cause trouble, but also to do so much good is unquantifiable. It is there's so much capacity and potential. And like, we have seen this on the Run for Something side with the young man who wins a seat on the Berkeley City Council and then changes the housing policy or gets police out of traffic enforcement. The young woman who holds office in Durham, who's bringing forth a universal basic income pilot to hundreds of families in the county. The Michigan state legislators who have won by, on some cases, tens or hundreds of votes, and then have made Michigan a transformed place. Ditto in Minnesota. In Virginia, we flipped the state legislature in 2019, and now 400,000 Virginians have access to healthcare that they didn't have before. Here in New York, where I live, we flipped the state Senate in 2019, taking it back from some like turncoat Democrats who were caucusing with Republicans, and made it easier to vote. It was hard to vote in New York before 2019, a blue state, and it was hard to vote. All of that is to say that when good people, even just a good person, decides to take ownership of government, take ownership of this process to change their lives and change their careers, they can change the world for someone. And like, what a beautiful thought. What a beautiful thought.
I agree. And do you feel that the system allows enough change? Because, a lot of people say, I want to do stuff, but the system doesn't let it, and the bureaucracy doesn't allow for it, and it's too complicated. I mean, have you found with candidates that it's harder to actually get things done because the system prevents them from getting them done rather than because they didn't have any good ideas?
Yeah, the system certainly does make it harder for folks. And in some ways, that's a feature, not a bug. You want change to be a little bit onerous. Like, it's good that there are some hoops to jump through. But, and we like to remind people, the system is just people. It's just people. And if you're willing to put in the time and the effort to build the relationships, you can make the system work for you. It might take longer than you'd like, but that is a solvable problem.
That's good to know, because the way I see it, certainly on the national stage, is that Republicans have been putting things in place so that the system becomes more complex because they don't want to bring about change. And we've seen this with the filibuster, and we've seen this with the lack of the Supreme Court being packed. It's like, from where I come from, I'm like, why doesn't Biden want to engage on these things? And it must be because he can't. The system prevents him.
Some of that is because he can't. Some of that because he has to make hard choices. And he has to prioritize where is worth spending his political capital. And I would argue that there were moments early on in his presidency where he could have spent his political capital differently. Yeah. But the hindsight is 2020. As we look to the future, like the next time, hopefully the Democrats have a full control of the government, they will make like the Minnesotans did and just push through transformative change, because it is possible. It is possible.
Well, it's not actually that many things. I was thinking about this, in terms of issues. Some gun regulation would be nice, putting Roe back on statute, things that are kind of big, what do they call them, hot button issues in this.
Yeah, and I would also push for some structural reforms so that we don't get into this mess again. But yeah, like the climate bill was incredible. There's stuff to do around higher education. There's stuff to do around voting reform. There's absolutely stuff to do on choice. There's stuff to do on codifying LGBTQ equality. But as we've seen with healthcare, 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, once you give people something, they do not like it when you take it away. Yeah. So let's give people as much as we possibly can, as fast as we possibly can.
It is interesting, isn't it? Just finally, it is really interesting that if you were to be very clear about, Democrat policies where, the idea that you can access healthcare without having to overpay for it, and you do have the right to choose, and it's not a religious issue, it's just between a woman and her doctor. Yeah. And that you don't want children to be executed in schools by these weapons of war. Very kind of simple issues, and yet I personally believe that Republicans would agree, or the majority of Republicans would actually agree with all of these policies, but they cannot bring themselves to support them because they're Republicans. And it's this branding, and it's this tribalism, and it's this cult-like mentality, undue influence and brainwashing, which we cover a lot on this show, that means that this addiction to their cause, just in name only,
Yeah.
is more powerful than what they truly believe as individuals.
People don't vote on policy. They vote on a feeling of community, on a feeling of tribe, on a feeling of identity, on a vibe, for lack of...
And the personality of the candidate. This is the tragedy, isn't it? Because, and I try to explain this to people, that, Democrats are not supporting Joe Biden. They're supporting democracy, and they're supporting the policies. And Joe Biden is not going to live forever. And when he is gone, there will be somebody else who is advocating for the same stuff. But with Donald Trump, it's different. The more indictments there have been, the more popular he seems to have become.
Among some people, yes, but also the more unpopular he has become. And I do think that's a distinction worth hammering home, as, while there are a pocket of Republicans who are really excited about him, independents, no. And even some establishment Republicans, absolutely not. The dangerous part is that he has remade the Republican Party in his image. And we saw that, to bring us back full circle, we saw that on the debate stage earlier this week, that every candidate had almost, Chris Christie did not, and Mike Pence was sort of hit or miss, but basically every candidate had his back. Every candidate was espousing things that he would espouse.
And they were asked as well, if Donald Trump is ultimately the candidate for the Republican Party, will you support him despite his criminal activity? And only all but 2, so 6 out of the 8 said yes.
Yeah. It's his party. It's his party. And that is the thing that we really have to be clear-eyed about, is who our opponents are, what they're willing to negotiate on, what kind of good faith actors they are. This is not the Republican Party of my childhood or yours.
Yeah.
And that is both alarming and also really clarifying. I think it helps us as we know how to move forward.
Okay. We have to finish, but I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to chat. I know how busy you are, and I wish you every success with Run for Something. And if anybody wants to know how to contact your organization, we'll put it down in the description so that they can kind of click through. Amanda Littman, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Anthony Davis. Subscribe to MAGA Uncovered, my new show with Ron Filipkowski on Wednesdays, and support me and independent journalism on Patreon at patreon.com/5Minute News. 5 Minute News also has its own YouTube channel, which you can subscribe and join. Join me next week with a brand new special guest and 3 more factual news stories to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.